Forget the church, follow Jesus. This was the title and the content of an article in Newsweek magazine written by Andrew Sullivan that came out right around Easter. And in the article, Andrew Sullivan said that unlike Jesus, the church has been obsessed with power and partisan politics. Unlike Jesus, the church has been very focused on material acquisition and passing judgment on other people. And Andrew Sullivan said that the church in some ways has become like a big bully with violent words and actions in the world. And so the only alternative is to forget the church and follow Jesus. A young man named Jeff Bethke said much the same thing, only he said it to rap. Why I hate religion and love Jesus. So far, the beat of his tune has had 18 million hits on YouTube. The United Methodist Church's General Conference just finished up in Tampa, Florida. General Conference happens every 4 years, and it has delegates from all over the world, United Methodists from all over the world who gathered together in Tampa, Florida. It has been live streamed, and I haven't watched any of the live streaming. I have followed some of the blogs and some of the Facebook comments, and people have been rather distraught in the things that I've been reading, saying essentially that the United Methodist Church, unfortunately during General Conference, has functioned with closed hearts, closed minds, closed doors. Forget the church, follow Jesus. There was a 2 cents worth in the Des Moines Register not that long ago, written by someone who said, I can be married in the church and I can have my funeral in the church and not have to listen to some preacher tell me every week something that I already know. That attitude, to paraphrase Mark Twain, I don't just believe it, I've seen it. We live in a culture that says to us that what we want as individuals is of prime importance, that we are to function independently and self-sufficiently. Our attitude is much like the saying on the poster that hung in my college dorm lo these many years ago, I'll do my thing, you do yours, and if by chance we find each other, it's beautiful. And so the church becomes, for many people, a low priority, somewhere behind sports and summer. The church becomes, for many people, a place to show up when it's convenient, when it works, with a prevailing attitude that it's okay to forget the church if you're following Jesus, that it's possible to be Christian without the church. And I know that it would be much easier to do it that way, to have the benefits and not the effort, to not have to worry about accountability and responsibility. I can understand, either because of disillusionment with the church or because it just doesn't work into everybody's busy schedule, why people might forget the church and follow Jesus. And if you're feeling down and discouraged right now, I need to tell you, I've been feeling kind of down and discouraged this week too, and so maybe it's good that we turn to the Gospel according to St. John and hear what Jesus is saying to disciples that are down and discouraged, to disciples who aren't sure what it looks like to follow him. Jesus uses the imagery of the grapevine, and this is a picture, an image that has been used throughout the Old Testament to talk about God's people. And so picture with me for a moment a healthy, green, and growing grapevine. Look at the trunk as it comes up out of the earth and twists upward. The trunk with its bark that is rough and real. That trunk that becomes a vine is the very source of life for the grapevine. And it doesn't take much imagination to think about the roots sunk deep into the earth, drawing water from the earth up into the vine. Jesus says that he is the vine, that he is the source of life for the branches. The branches, you and me, connected to Jesus, connected by his life blood, his roots sunk deep into the living water. It wouldn't be much of a grapevine if it were just the vine and that was the end of it. The vine needs the branches. And it wouldn't be much of a grapevine if there were just one branch. In a healthy, growing grapevine, there are many branches, all running together. And Jesus says the branches are you and me, the disciples, the followers of Jesus. Picture that grapevine. There's no one branch that is more important than the other. There's no one branch that has priority or preference or status or rank. The branches encircle and entwine each other, and it is impossible to see where one begins and another ends. And this is the picture that Jesus has of his followers, the church, you and me. And all the branches in the grapevine know that they are simply a part of the whole and know that their purpose is to produce fruit. Picture a cluster of grapes, beautiful and life-giving. And the fruit of the church, the fruit of the disciples who follow Jesus, is simply this: acts of love. And by love, I don't mean anything sentimental or emotional, not at all. And by love, I don't even mean correct theology or rules. The purpose of the followers of Jesus, all connected to the vine and one another, is to produce acts of love. To their brothers and sisters, yes, and to the people beyond the community. And the purpose of producing the fruit is to glorify God, the gardener. In the house that Jeff and I lived in before we moved here, we had a grapevine in the backyard that probably hadn't been pruned for at least a decade, maybe longer. It was beautiful and lush, but it didn't produce anything. Every productive grapevine needs a gardener, a farmer. And Jesus says that God is our gardener. And because God is love, God creates in love, God rules in love, God judges in love, and God prunes in love. And sometimes God prunes us by helping us to recognize that if we say that God is a priority in our lives, then what do we need to do to actually live that out? And sometimes God prunes us by helping us see the sinfulness of the church, and that perhaps one of the reasons that we are here is to reform the church. But the pruning that takes place is in love, for the gardener is love. See, this is what that picture says to us. This is what Jesus is telling us today. You can't follow Jesus and forget the church. If you choose to forget the church, you'll forget Jesus. Because Jesus will end up looking a whole lot like you do. That it is impossible to sever Jesus the vine and the church the branches without running into a problem of dead wood. That we are called to follow Jesus, which means that we are called to be his disciples in such a way that we live out our faith in the life of the church. You all celebrated my birthday with me a month ago. I had a number of people asking me how old I am, and if they truly asked me directly, I told them, otherwise I was a little coy. Well, I'm 58 years old, which means I've got 7 or 8 more years of ministry, most likely. And I've been thinking a lot this week about what I want my last years of ministry to look like. I want my last years of ministry to be here in this church. You see, the vision of First United Methodist Church is exactly what I want in a church. I don't want a church that's closed. I want open hearts and open doors and open minds. And I want a church that is willing to welcome each and every person who comes through those doors regardless. A church that recognizes that we don't need to think alike. That's not it at all. What we're called to is to love alike, to love each other. And I want to be a part of a church in which people look at First United Methodist Church and say, look how they love each other. In the ways that they talk to each other, in the ways that they talk about each other, look how they love each other. I want to be a part of a church that recognizes that how we are together is so much more important than any issue that we might wrestle with. I want to be a part of a church that values the gift, the incredible gift of each person who is here. A church that laughs together. A church that walks together on the journey of faith, knowing full well there are going to be questions, there are going to be struggles. It's not much of a journey, not much of an adventure without that, but that we encircle one another. We are entwined together. I want to be a part of a church that follows Jesus and gathers not out of some sense of oppression and obligation, but gathers for all those who are able-bodied and in town because we want to be together. Because we're growing together. Because we know that our purpose is to bear fruit, to love one another, and to love the people in our communities. I want to be a part of a church in which our children and youth come and they learn compassion. Compassion that they can take into their schools. I want to be a part of a church where people may be a little bit afraid about what it means to go forth on risk-taking mission, but they go anyway. Because perfect love casts out fear, and I don't think it casts out the emotion. It's God's love that abides in us and with us that gives us the courage to go forward despite our fear. Are we going to do it perfectly? No. We're imperfect people. Are there going to be weeds in our grapevine? Oh, yeah. That's the way it works. But here's the other thing I learned this week. I don't know about you, but we've got Creeping Charlie in our yard. And not only do we have Creeping Charlie in our yard, but the back meadow behind the parsonage, it is like pure Creeping Charlie. I don't like Creeping Charlie. I hate the smell of Creeping Charlie. There's only one other weed that I hate the smell of, and that's buttonweeds from all those years of walking beans. I have not been happy about the Creeping Charlie in our yard and in the meadow behind our yard. And it right now, because the Creeping Charlie is blooming, is a field of purple. But what I discovered this week is if I walk out into that meadow, clouds of butterflies take off. I mean monarchs. I mean red admirals and painted ladies and sulfurs. I mean skippers and swallowtails. Beautiful clouds of butterflies. I wouldn't miss it for the world. And this is what it means to follow Jesus and be disciples of Jesus Christ in the life of the church. We're connected to the vine. We're connected to each other. And in the most surprising ways, resurrection life and even butterflies can surprise us as we change the world. Amen and alleluia.